We are back in our Fiat, heading to have a quintessential Maine experience at Nonesuch Oysters, a boutique oyster farm in Scarborough. Can you think of anything better? Having oysters on the ocean in Maine as they are being harvested? Well, they tell me that they cannot keep up with demand, but they are working hard to produce over 50,000 oysters a month this summer.
Well, here we are at Pine Point on the working waterfront on Scarborough's relatively new pier, and we're very lucky because Scarborough has allowed us to perch our floating oyster nursery right here at this pier. And this is where we grow the baby oysters in the first phase of their life before we take them out onto our farm. It takes about 2 to 3 years in Maine to grow an oyster. We count basically on an inch a year, and while that seems like an incredibly long time, when you actually start at the beginning of the summer and they're just like a millimeter or two, and you see how many times they've doubled their size by the end of the summer, it's still an amazing, amazing process. There are 8 bins with mesh on the bottom that hold up the baby oysters, and we've got a water flow system through it so that the oysters are constantly filtering water, and they feed by absorbing the nutrients in the water. We talk a lot about this filtering system and how it can clean up polluted areas. And as the oysters clean up the environment, all sorts of other marine species are returning to the harbor. It's really exciting. In the oyster industry, we've appropriated a word from the wine industry, which is terroir, which refers to the impact an environment has on the species it's growing. So what a lot of people don't appreciate or just don't know is that up and down the East Coast, with very few exceptions, everybody is growing the same species of oysters, which is the Chrysostrea virginica oyster. Now, what makes them different is the environment that they're growing in. So here at Pine Point, we're just a stone's throw from the mouth of the Saco Bay, and then we're also at the foot of the biggest estuary in Maine, which is the Scarborough Estuary. And so at low tides, a completely different ecosystem is really ushering down on our farm, bringing much fresher water and tons of seagrass, and these two sort of forces are playing out on our farm. So we've got about 600,000 oysters in bags, in gear, and we've got a few 100,000 on the bottom waiting to finish off and grow and be harvested. So the second and the third sort of steps in the cycle, we go from the nursery to these floating bags, and then we put them on the bottom where they finish. We are out here every day doing something or other, and then all of these bags need to be flipped every week in the crazy fouling season, and then every 2 weeks pretty much other than that, just to keep all of the algae and other growth off of them so that water's filtering through.
And a lot of Maine businesses buy them, restaurants?
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, we prioritize Maine. We want to serve as many of them as locally as possible. And then when we have enough, we ship them out of state. We've had them in the Grand Central Oyster Bar in New York and Clio in Boston. We've had them in some really fun places. James Beard House. Out here, in the summer, the water can be quite warm. So it's often a surprise to people to taste a warmer oyster. And the advantage of tasting a warmer oyster is also that sometimes when things aren't super chilled, there's a little bit more flavor, so you get a better sense of the flavor profile when you have something that's not super chilled. We make it a nice little oyster bar here.
So you come out and do these tours?
We do. Every year since we started offering them 2 years ago, we've had like over 200 people come and sit on our boat and eat oysters.
That's awesome.
We make them a little mignonette sauce, and we try to enjoy the sort of pomp and circumstance of oysters in the Maine coast.
This is so beautiful. In the heart of your farm.
I know. It's a wonderful way to communicate with people.
Beautiful.
Well, if you really want to appreciate the terroir, the environment that is making our oyster what it is, then the best way to do it is just free of anything, and then you can go to town with the sauces.
This is such a cool experience. Thank you so much. This, my friends, is called Maine Life.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh my gosh, so good.